Hey everybody, so the new patch is out on the test server. Everything that will be going live in a month is out for testing right now. So I'm going to be doing a bunch of videos covering all of the new content that's coming. In this one, I'm going to be looking at specifically the Shapeshifter weapons, which are coming in the next patch. So let's get right into it. Okay, before I talk about the abilities specifically, let me just talk a little bit about how these Shapeshifter weapons work. So basically, you have your Q and Ws are shared across all weapons of the type, similar to every other weapon line, and these are just basic sort of human form abilities. And then every weapon has a unique E that transforms you into a different type of animal with different skills on their Q and W. So the Q and W spells get shifted out for your animal form when you're in animal form, and humans skills when you're in human form. These spells in animal form, the cost for casting them is something called a charge cost. And you can see these charge costs below your health bar here. You have up to 5 that you can store at once, and you get them basically by doing stuff with your human spells. So if I hit this dummy with one spell, I get 1 charge, and that lets me use it to cast an ability, which sometimes have a charge cost. Like you see 1 charge cost there. So basically the gameplay is you get charges with your human form, and then you transform and you consume them with your abilities in your animal form. Taking a look at all of the abilities, let's start with the Qs, Ws, and passives. So first Q is Unstable Projectile. You shoot a projectile of unstable energy at an enemy. It's a targeted spell, cast time. It does damage and does damage in a little bit of a cone behind them, and applies 1 shift charge for each, for every time you hit an enemy with it. This is basically like, you can think of this like a mage damage weapon line. No cooldown, it's just a cast time. You can spam it over and over and over, and it'll just keep doing damage, and a little bit of a cone behind your target as well as to your target. Q2 is called Reality Crack. It's basically one of these combo abilities where you hit the first one and the second one activates. It's basically just a line skill shot that does damage, and if you hit the first one, you unlock the second one, which is the exact same thing except bigger and more damage. The first Reality Crack will give you 1 charge if you hit an enemy, and the second one will give you 2 charges if you hit an enemy. So here's the first one, and then you can recast for quite a long time. It has a 2-second cooldown in between. The second one gives you 2 charges and just a little bit more. And it's a very long range spell as well, you can see there. So the first one is a little bit smaller, less damage, 1 charge. The second one, bigger, more damage, 2 charges. Next on the list is Adapting Matter. This is sort of like your supporty option. You basically have a targeted AoE on the ground, and if it hits an enemy, it does damage. If it hits an ally, it gives a shield for 4.5 seconds. Hitting at least 1 enemy gives you a shift charge, and hitting at least 1 ally will give you a shift charge. So for example, if I use it on myself, I'll get a shield and 1 charge. If I use it on an enemy, again, a shift and 1 charge. If I use it on both of us, I get a shield that does damage and gives me 2 charges. So basically, sort of hybrid between support and damage. Last on the Q list is Pulse Shock. So create a shockwave in front of you, dealing magic damage, and it decreases the damage resistances by just a little bit for 6 seconds, stacking up to 3 times. Each enemy hit applies 1 shift charge on you, up to 2. So basically, if you hit 1 person with it, you get 1 charge. If you hit 2 or more, you'll get 2 charges. And it is basically just a little cone attack in front of you. And then you can stack the pierce if you keep hitting them over and over again. You can see the duration of the debuff refreshes to you every time you hit it, so you can stack it up to 3 constantly. Moving on to our W abilities, starting off we have Distortion. Conjure a cloud of distorted reality with a 4-meter radius at a ground target location, lasts 3 seconds and deals magic damage every 0.75 seconds, and also slows by 20%. Each enemy hit applies 1 shift charge on you up to 2 times. So if I use this on here, just a ground target ability, I get 1 stack. And the next hits don't give you any more stacks, but if I hit 2 enemies, then it'll give me 2 stacks. And if I hit 3 enemies, it'll also just give me 2 stacks. It doesn't give you any more for hitting more. It's maxed out at 2. Next is Positional Drift. Shoots out a tendril in a target direction, rooting and pulling enemies towards you, up to 5 enemies. It roots them for a little bit and does a little bit of damage. And each enemy hit gives you 1 shift charge, up to 2 again. So this is a common theme. Basically for AoE abilities, it typically seems like if you hit 1 enemy, you get 1 charge. If you hit more than 1 enemy, you get 2 charges. And this is just a basic little pull like that. And so the training enemies can't move, but enemies will get pulled towards you up to 5. And they'll be rooted. Next on the W list is Tether Shift. This is a targeted ability that can target either an ally or an enemy, and as soon as you target someone, you get 1 shift charge. If you target an ally, it gives them 67 resistances, and for both ally and enemy, you can recast it. If you recast it on an ally, they will be pulled towards you and be given a shield, and if you cast on an enemy, you will fly towards them or dash towards them. So if he's on an enemy here, he's got a pretty long range, and I can just fly towards them like that. So kind of the opposite of the previous W. On an ally, I don't think I can pull these dummies, but I should be able to shield them with this. Oh, it doesn't actually tether them for some reason. But basically, if you use it on an ally, it's very similar to an enemy, except when you activate it, it will pull your ally towards you and give them a shield. Last on the list for W's is Polymorph. You basically shoot out a skill shot orb. If the target is dismounted, it will polymorph them, basically turn them into a little rat for a specific amount of time, and then they're immune to being polymorphed for 5 seconds. You can't just chain polymorphs with multiple shape-shifting staffs. Hitting a mob will not polymorph them, instead it will decrease their max and current health by 15% for 5 seconds. Also, orb does damage and explodes on impact, dealing damage in a radius, and it will apply 1 shift charge to you as long as you hit an enemy. Basically a little ball. And the main target gets polymorphed or size reducted, depending on if it's a mob or a person. If it's a person, I believe it also, if they're under this cannot be transformed again effect for 5 seconds, I believe they said it will also do this secondary effect instead, reducing their max and current health by 15%. But that doesn't say that on here, so they might have removed that. I'm not too sure. I'll have to test that. But basically, just this skill shot, give 1 charge, polymorph, or health reduce. One interesting note about this is that you cannot polymorph people that are in transformations. So I guess transformations sort of override the polymorph effect. So it's a little bit weird. It might be a bug, so who knows, that might change by the time the thing comes out. But as of right now, you cannot polymorph people that are already shapeshifted. Next passive is Intimidating Presence. Anytime one of your Q abilities damages an enemy, it decreases their damage, so their damage output by 3% for 7 seconds, stacking up to 3 times, and also increases your threat generation against mobs by 100%. So this is like your PvE tank spell, and then also if you want to reduce their damage, so you can see if I use my Q on this, they have the stack of reduced damage there. Kind of synergizes as well with this thing as well, because it also has a stacking up to 3 times debuff. You can see the damage is getting reduced by 9% there. Next on the list is Innate Power. After dealing damage, you get 1 shift charge on you every 5 seconds for 30 seconds. So basically, let me get rid of my charges here real quick. A little bit of spoilers. Dealing any damage while you are in human form will start generating stacks. And you can see I got 1 there, because I had a little bit of debuff running, and I'll get another one now. So they slowly just charge up for 5 seconds. As long as you've dealt damage to them, you'll just slowly gain stacks like this. So it's very good for generating stacks. However, if you transform into a animal form, you will basically lose this buff, and so I won't be getting stacks anymore. You can see I'm not getting any more stacks. But as long as I go back to human form, do 1 more damage, even if it's just a basic auto attack like that, I'll start getting stacks again. Last on the passive list is Rule Bender. Rule Bender, after casting a W ability, increases your auto attack speed and cast speed by 30% for 5 seconds. Which is pretty basic, just that. And I have increased cast speed and attack speed. Okay, moving on to the E abilities, where these things get really interesting, or the shape-shifting. So basically, shape-shifting has a bunch of different aspects to it. So if you read, let's start with Panther here. Basically, this changes your stats. So your armor, the stats like your health, your magic resist, your auto attack damage, all that stuff doesn't matter anymore. It's all overridden by this buff that you get from the Panther. And you can see the stats down here under where your other stuff normally is. So 1, you change all your stats. 2, each one has a passive ability. You can see On the Prowl here for Panther, which I'll go over in a second. And then you also obviously transform, and you get access to these abilities instead of your other human form abilities. Oh, and also each transformation has a different cooldown and duration. So for example, the Panther here, you can transform for up to 12 seconds at a time. So if I transform and wait 12 seconds, you can see it here, it will forcefully untransform me back into human after 12 seconds. But it only has a 4-second cooldown, so I can actually switch back and forth fairly fast between them. Okay, so starting off looking at our Panther, so it will transform you for 12 seconds tops with a short 4-second cooldown. Now note that the cooldown only applies when you're transforming into Panther and not out of Panther. So you can actually transform faster sort of than you may originally think. You can see that cooldown there. Only goes on cooldown when transforming into Panther. And you can go 12 seconds at max. And the passive of the Panther is that if there are no enemies within a 9-meter radius for 1 second, so that's a 1-second fade time basically, you will turn into stealth. So I'm stealth right now, but my move speed is slowed by 30%. If I get close to an enemy like this, I will become out of stealth and return to normal speed. So basically, if you're in Panther and no one's near you, no enemy is near you, then you'll be in stealth, but you'll be a little bit slower. Looking at the stats of the Panther, max health is relatively low. You can see I'm in flat 8 gear for all of this with max spec, and my max health is a little bit lower than when I'm in human form, so you're a little bit squishier. Also armor and magic resist, not particularly high. You can see sort of on this, where is it? So it's lower than like a leather jacket, for example, as well. So you're a little bit squishy in Panther form. However, your move speed is, when you're not in this, I think this is a little bit faster than normal. It's really hard to tell, honestly, but you're a little bit faster than normal. And you have crowd control resistance, again, a little bit less, I believe. Auto attack damage is pretty decent, and you attack very fast. That's one thing with Panther, is you hit quite fast. So you do have quite a lot of auto attack damage with the Panther right out. You also get a magical ability bonus of 40%, so similar to a cloth bonus, and resilience pen of 50%, which is very high for resilience pen. Or not very high, but it is quite high. It's higher than like spears and stuff. Similar to other sort of high resilience pen weapon lines. So looking at the Q of the Panther, it's another combo ability. So the first and second swipe is basically charge through an enemy and deal some physical damage. This costs 0 energy, but if you have more than 2 or more energy, it will consume the energy and let you continue the combo. So the first and the second swipe are exactly the same. They consume 2 charges if you have them available and deal damage to the enemy. However, the third swipe, so if you have 4 or more energy, you can quickly do the first 2 and then move on to the third one, which is basically the exact same as the first 2, except it also has a little bit of an execute in it. It does an initial 25% of the target's missing health as true damage, but it also sets the cooldown of your transformation to 15 seconds, so you can't just go back and do it right again, sort of thing. So for example, let me get my stacks up here. We have more than 4 stacks. First one eats 2, second one eats 2, and then third one, a little special execute. You can see there that little claw coming down for the true damage. And then my cooldown is quite long. The second ability on the Panther is Pounce. Leap towards the target position, dealing damage or more damage versus mobs in a 4-meter radius upon impact. It costs 1 charge to cast, and hitting an enemy player will reduce the cooldown of this ability by 50%. Base cooldown is 8.6, or around probably 10 seconds, because I have some cooldown reduction. So basically just Pounce. Looks like the cooldown reduction is not working on the mobs, but normally it will reduce the cooldown to half of this. And just a total of damage. So basically, if you have 5 charges with Panther, I guess their idea is that you can jump in and then triple. Okay, next on the list is our Ent, is what most people are going to call it. The root-bound staff transforms you into an Ent. Starting up, it has a duration of 20 seconds and a cooldown of 4 seconds. So again, you can swap back and forth on the Ent very frequently. It's one of those low cooldown ones, and you can also stay in it quite a long time. So this is going to have a lot of uptime on your Ent form. The passive on the Ent form is that when you are transformed, you increase the max and current health of up to 20 allies in an 11-meter radius, which is this green circle around you, by 10%. So if we look at this healing dummy here, as soon as I enter radius, it's going to go up to 2200 health. And as soon as I go up, it's back to 2000. So basically, anyone in this radius who's an ally up to 20 will have their health buffed by 10%, which is quite a strong passive, to be honest. Looking at the stats of the Ent, you seem to be about as tanky as somebody in leather. So you can see I'm wearing full leather right now, and I've about the same amount of health. The armor, magic resist, card control resistance, all that stuff is very similar to what you'd be getting with leather with equivalent IP. However, it has the unique passive of having energy regeneration and health regeneration per second. So if I like swing abilities here, you kind of just like get your energy back really fast in this Ent form, which is pretty crazy. So you will literally never have any energy problems if you're running the Ent, and you also get some nice little health regen, which is quite strong. You're just constantly going to be healing yourself. Move speed seems to be, I think, about the same as walking speed. Again, I don't know what the walking speed is, but it seems to be pretty similar. And you do have a ranged attack in this Ent form. And one thing that's not listed, for whatever reason, some of these transformations have special auto attacks, and the Ent is one of those. So the auto attack has I think it's a 3-hit combo. Yeah, 3-hit combo. On the third auto attack, you do an explosion of basically a poison. So they take damage every 1 second for, looks like 4 or 5 seconds. So you actually do quite a lot of like poison damage if you're constantly attacking. Also for stats, you have a little bit of magical ability bonus at 20%, and more of healing at 40%, and CC duration is at 20% as well. Moving on to the abilities of the Ent. First up, your Q ability is basically just a heal that does a little bit of damage to the ground targeted. Little AoE here. It's free to cast, costs no energy. It heals allies inside it, and it will do contact damage on enemies. You hit them. Just a little bit of contact damage. If you have at least one shift charge, it will be a bigger AoE and it will heal for more, basically. So let me get a shift charge here. Now it's a much bigger AoE and it will heal for more. So you're basically kind of like a healer with that ability. Your W ability, let me just check this up real quick. This costs 3 energy, and you basically, let me just show you what it looks like. Basically channel down like that, and then you come up. So you gather energy initially, becoming immune to damage while you're channeling. For up to 3 seconds, you cannot be interrupted. And it can be used while you're stunned or silenced. So basically, if you're getting hit, you can just pop this kind of no matter what. It's kind of like a cleanse and an immune. It's basically an ice block. That's the best way to think of it. It's an ice block, but it also slows enemies by 30% in that radius, and it deals damage every second, and then it roots every 2 seconds for 4 seconds. So it slows, roots, basically does a lot of debuffs, makes you immune. It's quite a strong spell if like people are trying to come in on top of you or do damage to you. And then also, at the start of the channel, you cleanse all card control effects and debuffs of all 20 allies within the radius, and while in the radius, allies gain a shield that absorbs about 1,000 damage at this IP. And on top of that, it also grants immunity to force movement effects, but it breaks when the shield ends. So basically, this is like a massive, big support ability. Think of it kind of like an arcane E in terms of effectiveness. So if I use it on my allies here, I get that nice, juicy green shield. And I'm immune during all of that. So quite a strong ability for supporting. Next on the Shapeshift lift, we have the Blood Moon Staff, which is our Werewolf Staff. Transforms you into a werewolf. Looking at the stats on this, it's very similar to Tree in terms of duration and cooldown. 20-second duration, you can stay in it for quite a while, and a 6-second cooldown. It's a little bit longer than the other ones. You can't transform back and forth quite as often, but it's still relatively short, I would say. The passive of the werewolf is that whenever you do damage, you steal 10% of health the enemy has lost. So basically it's 10% built lifesteal with everything that you do inside of this werewolf transformation. Looking at the stats of the werewolf, again, it is sort of similar to, I think it was the Panther in stats, where it's a little bit squishier. That's probably like around a cloth HP level, and armor and magic resist, again, a little bit lower than leather, so probably looking around like a clothy. You've got same speed as the Ent, I think that's just normal move speed. You get, again, energy regeneration and health regeneration inside of it for whatever reason. So you can just get it all back when you go into all your energy back when you're in your form. And the big thing with this one though, is that your auto attack damage is 160 and you attack quite fast, and not only that, but you also have another one of these hidden passives inside of your Werewolf Form. So as you attack, you stack up this thing which increases your speed and damage up to 6 stacks. So you can see the Werewolf does quite a lot of auto attack damage compared to most things in the game. And by the way, this passive is a self passive, so if you switch target, you'll remain with the passive. It doesn't reset on target. Looking at the abilities on our Werewolf Form, for the Q, you basically have a little cone damage that deals damage to everything in its AoE, like this. And if you have at least one shift charge, it will consume that shift charge and it will create a blood pool behind the first enemy that you hit, will heal you and increase your move speed by 50% for 3 seconds. So if I get some charges here, you see it creates a blood pool right there behind that guy. If I pick it up, I heal, and I move faster. So every time you use this and you have a charge, you'll get this, and you can just keep sort of chaining them together. Your W spell is called Rip Through. It costs 1 charge, and you dash through the target enemy, landing 3 meters behind them, deals physical damage to any enemy you pass through, so not just your target, but also all the other enemies you pass through, and increases your attack damage by 60% for 4 seconds. So we just talked about how you do a lot of attack damage, well, you can buff it even more with your W. So you can see the all range is also not too bad. Dash through, and you get that auto attack buff. And by the way, the cooldown's also pretty short at, I think it's like 5 seconds default, so you can basically keep up this buff for quite a long time. Next on our list of staves is the Primal Staff, or the Bear Staff, which turns you into a bear. This one has a 30-second duration and a 4-second cooldown, so again, one that you can transform back and forth fairly regularly, and also has a very long duration on it. The passive of the bear is that when your health is below 50%, your damage and duration of crowd control effects will increase by 20% and your cast speed by 40%. So basically, if you're under 50% HP in bear form, you are enraged, you are much stronger than you normally are. Looking at the stats on the bear form, one thing to note is this HP is quite high, almost 4k at a flat 8 max spec here. Again, you have that health regen and energy regen built into you. Armor and magic resist, crowd control, that's all a little bit higher than leather, and probably not quite as high as plate, so you're pretty tanky with the high HP that you have, more tanky than you are in human form for sure. You also get threat generation and CC duration in your bear form, as well as a little bit of rezo pen and a little bit of magical ability bonus. Your auto attacks don't have anything fancy as far as I found. They're basically just simple swipes, not really super effective. Looking at the abilities on Bear Form, for your Q, you smash the ground and AoE in front of you, and it increases your threat of all mobs hit. Just a little bit of damage like that. No cost for charge, and a short cooldown of 4 seconds, or 5 seconds, sorry. However, if you have 1 shift charge on you when you cast this, it will also stun enemies that you hit. And consume that charge, obviously. Your second ability, your W ability on the Bear Form, you combine the 2 abilities, so it's another combo ability. It costs 2 to activate, and the first ability is a dash in a target direction that knocks back all enemies you pass through and deals some damage and reduces their resistances. So a pierce, damage, and knockback. The second ability, which you can use, I believe, even if you don't hit the first one, is this little roar thing, and it will deal physical damage to players in a cone and make them flee for 1.2 seconds. And it also makes you highest priority target for all mobs hit. So it's again good for taking aggro and PvE. One thing to note as I was playing around testing this is that if you are under 50% health on the Bear Form, all of these abilities sort of combo together. So you can fear into this if you have that cast speed from your under 50% HP. Next on the list, we have the Golem transformation, and this one is the first one that has a really long cooldown on your transformation, so you can't go back and forth all the time. It's basically 20-second duration, and I believe the cooldown is a little bit over 20 seconds. I have cooldown, so I think it's, what, probably 25-ish or something like that. I don't know, a little bit over 20 seconds, you become a very big Golem for a while. The passive ability on the Giant, the text here is a little bit wrong. So it does grant you immunity to all force movement effects and increases your max and current health based on the shift charges you have, although I don't think it increases your damage based on the shift charges. So basically the more shift charges you have, the more tanky you will be. And also a unique thing about this one is that it consumes a shift charge every 3.5 seconds. So if you go in with 5 and don't use abilities, you'll slowly be losing your shift charges. However, this is a little bit wrong. So in my testing, there seems to be a sort of like a hidden auto attack based thing on the Golem as well. If I go in with 0 charges, you can see if I auto attack this, it's just sort of a normal auto attack and 97 damage. However, if I get my stacks up to 5, now you can see when I auto attack, I do this little AoE under as well. That does 131 on top of that. I'm not sure how many stacks you need to get this AoE, but so this, you increase your damage with stacks, seems to be wrong, but it seems like if you transform with stacks, you get this bonus to your auto attacks or something. So I'm not entirely sure how this works. Hopefully there'll be a little bit more, explain more about these auto attack augments when they put out patch notes or something when this actually comes out. Looking at the stats of the Golem, this is your tanky boy, lots of HP, more than any of the other ones. Again, health and energy regeneration. This one has, I believe, a slower move speed, slower move speed than the other ones. So you're actually probably gonna move slower than you are in human form when you're in this. But you get a bunch of armor and magic resist, so you're very tanky. Same with, you get crowd control resistance as well. Auto attack damage, again, sort of depends on whether you have that weird passive thing. Threat gen 50%, CC duration 50%, so basically just a big boy tank. Looking at the abilities on the Golem, starting with your Q ability, you throw a boulder at a target position, dealing damage and it stuns. And interestingly, this one has no cost at all. There's not a condition if you have charges, it just never costs any charges no matter what. Relatively short cooldown, you can just spam out boulders, they stun, deal a little bit of damage. Your W ability is a combo ability. Again, it costs 0 to cast. The first one is this little thing. It pulls in everything in a cone and creates these little walls, so everything would be pulled in towards you there. And it also, so it knocks them back and pulls them into you. It does a little bit of damage as well, and makes you the highest priority target for all mobs hit. The recast, you can do it no matter what. It's this little slam around you. It will deal more damage and throw all enemies into the air for just a little bit of a knock-up, and creates a rune lasting 5 seconds, which decreases the max and current health of enemies by 50% that stay inside of it. So basically you can pull them in and make them small and knock them up, obviously. So Golem's a little bit unique because you don't actually use the shift charges for anything besides buffing how strong your Golem is. And then they slowly dissipate over time when you're in your Golem form. So you can see I have up to 6k HP because I got to 5 stacks and it buffs my Golem form. Next on the list, we have the Hellspawn Staff, which is the Bat Staff. This turns you into a little imp or a bat, or whatever you want to call it. Looking at the stats on this one, so a 30-second duration. This one you can go in very long time, and it has a cooldown of 6 seconds, so sort of one of those medium cooldowns on it as well. The passive of this bat is if you die when you're in bat form, instead of dying, you prevent dying and heal yourself over 3.5 seconds based on the amount of shift charges that you have. While you're healing, you're immune to damage and are stunned. So you're basically caught in this little animation, sort of again like an ice block, except you're healing up to anywhere from 5% health to 30% health based on how many charges you have. However, when this happens, it eats all of the stacks that you had, and you get put back in human form, and your shapeshift cooldown is increased to a whole minute. So you cannot shift back to your bat for a full minute afterwards. Looking at the stats of the bat, this is very squishy. I think the squishiest of all of them. You have pretty low HP, again not too low, but lower than all the other ones. Your move speed is pretty normal. Again, you get that health and energy regeneration, low armor and magic resist, low crowd control resistance, not too low. And you get a big bonus to your magic ability damage, though 50%. The bat also has an attack speed chain, like some of the other ones, very similar to the Ents one, ranged attack, 3-hit combo. The third one is, yeah, supposed to create that little pool of lava under them. Kind of like a demon cape on your third attack. Looking at the abilities on the bat, starting off with your Q ability, you basically throw out this fiery ball, which does damage to anything it passes through. If you have at least one charge, you can consume the charge to teleport to the ball's location, wherever it is, and explode it, dealing even more damage. So it's free to cast, but if I get myself a charge here, you can see I can recast it now. I'll teleport to the ball's location, and I'll do an explosion of damage in an AoE that does even more damage than when the ball originally passes through. The W on the bat is Hellfire Barrage. Basically, you target an enemy and you do this barrage of damage to them, and you slow yourself a little bit, but you can move while you're doing it. Very simple ability. It costs a whole 3 charges, so it's very expensive, but it does a lot of damage, and you can basically move around and channel them like that. Pretty simple ability, costs a lot of charges, but does a buttload of damage. Last but not least, we have the light color, or the hawk, I'm assuming people are going to call it, or the bird, the hawk, whatever people call it. Let me transform here. Basically an Avalonian bird is what you turn into here. In terms of the stats for transforming, again, a 20-second duration, so a little bit shorter, and a high cooldown at 15 seconds, about without the almost there. So you can't just transform back and forth like some of the other ones. The passive ability on the hawk, you get immunity to root and slow effects, and transforming while having 5 shift charges active will increase your move speed by 60% for 3 seconds. So you kind of want to get to max stacks with this, and you will get, I think I bugged down that training gun somehow. There we go. So I have 5 charges. When I transform, I become very fast for a short period of time. Looking at the stats of our bird here, it's a little bit, it's surprisingly tanky. It's got a decent amount of HP, a little bit more than you would have with like leather, but again, it's probably pretty similar to leather. Has a health and energy regeneration, move speed is normal, armor and magic resist I think are a little bit lower, but has a little bit higher health, so not too tanky, not too squishy either. Crowd control resistance pretty normal, and magic ability bonus plus 45%, so again, sort of like clothy damage bonus on that. One unique thing about this bird's auto attack, doesn't have an attack chain or anything, but the attack range on the bird is very long. So this is a sort of a normal attack range on your human form. If I transform to a bird, I can attack from basically a screen distance away. So if you're like, you can see I can attack from here. I can barely see what I'm attacking. So it's quite a long range, kind of like the Whispering Bow. And the auto attacks aren't too bad damage either. Looking at the bird abilities now, your first ability is basically just a beam of light, and I should note that anytime you deal damage to an enemy, I believe it's anytime you do damage, although it seems kind of buggy if I'm being honest, you get this light spark, which is supposed to be called Eagle's Mark, I think. So basically this is just a normal sort of beam thing. Deal damage. If you have 1 charge, it will consume it and boost its cooldown by 60 seconds, otherwise it's a little bit longer. So it's about a 5-second cooldown without it and pretty short with it. If that enemy has a mark on them, basically it seems like this second part, the eagle mark part, is a little bit bugged right now, so I imagine it's just going to be whenever you deal damage, probably in eagle form, you mark them with this eagle's mark, and if you hit them with a beam, then it will explode, dealing more damage in an AoE. The second ability on the Eagle form is Judgment. It costs 2 energy. It has a cooldown of 25 seconds or 30 seconds, so it's even longer than the cooldown of the bird. So you can't spam this ability at all. It's basically a targeted ability. You cast on an enemy after 1 second. That beam will come down and do a bunch of damage to them and anything in the AoE. Now, one thing to note, this has a cast time, so it's a little bit of a cast time, about 1.5 seconds probably, and then also has a little bit of delay before it hits. But it does quite a lot of damage in a big AoE. Okay, so those are all of the different shapeshifter weapons. Just a couple of my opinions and notes on these before this video ends. Again, I haven't done really much testing at all. One thing to note that I was really interested in is persistent effects. So if you buff yourself with, say, this royal jacket, this effect persists through your transformation. So you get this while you're transformed. So things like stalker jackets, even like face robe buffs, any buff you put on yourself, including like sprints, for example, you can pop your sprint, immediately go into your form, and you'll move faster in that form for the first little bit. So any persisting effects or buffs that you have on you will stay on you when you transform. So obviously this is really strong if you pair like, let's say, a big tanky boy with a stalker jacket. You can do things like chain to them, activate your stalker jacket, hook in, and then transform, and you'll be doing a stalker jacket while you're super tanky in the Golem Form. You can keep them in here with the knockups and shit. Yeah, there's obviously going to be a lot of combos with like persisting effects on all of your abilities going into your forms. Another note similar to this is that things like cooldown reduction, if I use a long cooldown spell here, so you can see this has a 12-second, 10-second cooldown. If I use my meditation, my assassin hood, you can see this gets reduced by it as well. So all of your abilities, both the ones that are active and the ones in your human and your animal forms, will benefit from things like cooldown rate buffs from like refreshing sprint and assassin hood. Just a general thought, if you're curious about sort of like where these items are probably going to go into the meta, just going through each of them here, the Golem one is probably, honestly, you could see it for solo, but it's probably mainly oriented and trying to be balanced and stuff around sort of like small to large group PvP. It's sort of like a tank option, has a pull, debuff, stuff like that. So you're probably going to mainly see this one as a tank sort of type person in group PvP, although also I think it has tons of viability for solo play as well. You're probably going to see some solo builds with it as well. The Ent, this is obviously a group one. It's a healer, it's a support, basically very similar, you can think of to like an arcane, kind of has healing as well as that arcane stuff. I think one of these in every 20-man group is probably going to be a necessity. You're probably going to see at least like, this is going to be one of those necessary support roles. It's going to be very strong. Obviously the E is sort of counters the clump and dump style. If you get caught in the clump and dump, you can immediately just pop your W and help everybody out become immune. It's very good for that sort of like ZVZ 20 plus people sort of fights as a support role. The Werewolf, this is obviously going to be your solo small group sort of stuff. This thing seems absurdly strong just at original look at. Highest auto attack damage in the game besides like a bow using its E. So you have really high consistent damage, 10% lifesteal on everything. Very, very good for like the solo meta. Mobility, lifesteal, healing, consistent damage, basically everything you want for solo, and can probably scale into like small scale as well. Bear Form, again, this is another one that's probably going to be very good for solo and small scale. CC, damage, tankiness, I mean, again, it's another one that has some cool combos with it as well. I don't see this getting into like too big group sizes, so probably nothing in like the 20v20 plus, but for anything under that, anything solo up to 10v10, I could see this maybe having a place depending on the meta. Panther, this one's a little bit hard to place. Obviously it has some solo potential. I don't think this one's gonna be honestly that good. It kind of depends on like how the numbers are for it. It's very much like that assassin playstyle, but I feel like a bloodletter in a group play is just gonna do that so much better. So maybe it'll have some solo viability. Probably it can do a lot of burst. That stealth is gonna be really good for like ratting and stuff, but probably more towards solo than anything else for the Panther. The Bat Form staff, this is likely going to be your backline DPS for like 5v5. It's going to fit that like light crossbow, bow, that sort of style. Just like consistent damage, fires. Consistent backline damage is basically what this thing does. It's quite squishy, but it has quite a high damage output, combining the abilities from both your Bat Form and your human form. You can just constantly be putting out abilities. You have the regen built into the transformations to keep that all up, energy regen built in, so you're probably going to see this thing as a backline DPS, maybe some solo viability as well with builds like the face scale robe. You can combo with the W on this thing to do a buttload of damage, but probably mainly going to be seen in small scale backline as a DPS option. Lastly, we have the Hawk or the light color or the bird, whatever you want to call it. This thing, I honestly don't really know. Obviously, it's got that big 30-second cooldown damage E, so they're probably aiming to have it as like a ZVZ type thing, but honestly, I don't really see it as a super good ZVZ option. You usually want your damage to be a little faster than having like cast time and a delay and all of that, so we'll have to see. Obviously, auto attacks being super long range, you have viability with builds like that, so honestly, this is the one I'm not really too sure about. Obviously, people will probably try it for like ZVZ. That's what's sort of intended by SBI, I think, but it could have some viability outside of that as well. I do see it sort of being overshadowed by the Imp staff for most of like backline DPS options, though, in smaller scale fights. Anyways, that's all the things I have to cover for the transformation staffs in this video. I'll be doing some more testing with like builds and stuff. I'll probably do some duels and try some cool stuff out later. So I might do another video on these later, more looking at like what builds you can sort of look to run with them when they come out. But for now, let me know in the comments what kind of combos you're looking at using them for, or content you're looking at using them for. I think there's some really interesting potential in these. They're going to be very unbalanced, either good or bad. So just let me know what you think of them in the comments, and I will see you soon for more of this patch content.